Hello, I'm Heidi Manicherry. I'm one of the teachers of the deaf at SENDsuccess, and this is the second part of the three-part series of lessons for primary age pupils. And this session is going to look at communication and confidence. So in the session today, we're going to talk about what communication means and also why it can be hard when you have a hearing impairment. We're going to think about some of the feelings you might have when communication is hard. We're going to look at good communication ideas and ideas for feeling confident, and also to know who to ask for help when things are difficult. So what is communication? So the first one on our list there is talking, and that's usually what people think of first when we talk about communication. And talking to someone and having a conversation isn't just about what you say, it's also about listening, understanding what that person has said, and then talking back to them. So it kind of has two aspects. It has the talking and also the listening and understanding. So talking, that's really important, but there's also lots of other things that we do as well as talking that communicate with other people. And the second one is facial expressions. So we all use our faces without even realizing we're doing it sometimes to communicate. It might be to communicate how we feel sometimes. If we're happy, we might smile, our eyes might widen, or if we're cross, we might frown. If we're sad, we might make a sad face. So our faces communicate lots about how we are feeling and support the words that we're saying as well. Another way we communicate is through gesture, and gesture, it just means it's using our hands to communicate in our arms. And language which uses gesture is British Sign Language. So that's obviously a language that uses signs and facial expressions and body, all the non-verbal things, to communicate with other people. But it's not just sign language. We use gesture all the time, every day. We use gesture to say hello to people. We wave our hands. Some people use their hands lots when they are talking to support what they're saying. And that can be really helpful, especially if you have trouble hearing someone. If they're using lots of gesture, it can help fill in some of those gaps that might be there. Our bodies also communicate lots about how we are feeling, so body language. If we're not feeling great, we might slump over, we might turn our bodies away, and that communicates lots about what we are saying to somebody. And also the way we talk. So you might have heard this word intonation, and intonation just means the way our voices move up and down. So if we're happy, we might sound really happy, our voices might go a bit higher. If we're sad, we might not move our voices up and down as much, it might go a bit lower. So communication isn't just talking, it's lots of different non-verbal, so not using just your voice, there's lots of other things happening as well when we communicate. So hearing impairment and communication. So when we talked about talking, we talked about it's not just the words, it's also listening and understanding. And sometimes hearing impairment can make it a bit more difficult to understand what someone is saying. And that's because we might miss information, or the person we're talking to might do something that makes it hard for us to hear them. So for example, adults might cover their mouths, and that might make it hard because you're using the face, you're watching that person's face to get clues about what they are saying. So if their mouth's covered, you miss out on that information, and that can make it really difficult to understand. Also, if they stand too far away, and it means your hearing device won't pick up what they're saying, so that can mean you don't understand, you don't hear, and therefore you don't understand what they are saying. Sometimes in school, with lots of people around or even at home, um, conversations between people can move really quickly. And that's really hard for someone with a hearing impairment, just because when we communicate and we have a hearing impairment, we need to focus on all those communications, so all the gestures, the facial expressions, and if conversations moving quickly between people, it can be difficult to keep up with that. So this can mean people are turning away from you, you're missing out on their facial expression and their lip pattern, and this can mean it can be difficult and you might not be able to understand all the time what everyone is saying. Having trouble with communication can be really tough, and it can make you feel not great sometimes. And these are some of the emotions you might feel. So you might feel upset, you might feel really sad because you're not understanding what people are saying, or you're not able to tell other people how you feel. You might end up feeling lonely at times because conversations might be happening and you don't feel able to keep up. And that means you might not want to take part in those conversations anymore, which can mean you are on your own more, which isn't a nice feeling sometimes. It also might make you feel quite frustrated, and not everyone understands what it's like to have a hearing impairment, and not being able to explain to them, or them not understanding how it feels, might make you feel frustrated. It might be quite scary when other people are saying things and you don't understand, especially if it's in a new situation where you don't know what's being asked of you. It can be quite frightening. And also, if you're spending a lot of time trying to communicate and trying to understand people, it can make you feel really tired at the end of the day, especially a long day at school. You might come home and just feel exhausted and not feel like talking to anyone, and that's completely normal. So what can you do to make things easier? So one thing that really helps is just telling other people that you are deaf and that you have a hearing impairment. And you might want to think about what words you'd like to use to tell someone. There might be a certain phrase that you use to explain, and it's good to practice and have a think about this. Telling your friends that you are deaf helps them to start understanding why it might be hard and some of the things they can do to make it easier for you. Asking for help when you need it. Teachers, family, friends, anyone you feel comfortable talking to. If things are getting hard, asking for help is really important, because then we can put things, we can speak to other children, we can help them understand, we can make things easier, and hopefully it will stop some of those not great emotions happening, those feelings. If you didn't hear or didn't understand, it's very useful to tell someone, because they might not realise that you haven't understood, and they might be doing things that aren't helpful to you and making you feel not great. So telling them that you didn't hear and understand is really important. And just being open about your deafness, explaining about your hearing aid, why you wear it, or not hiding away from your hearing impairment is really important to help other people understand. Other things you can do is asking someone to repeat when you haven't heard. It's really important you do that and don't pretend you understand, because people are really happy to repeat things if it's going to help. Just explain that you have a hearing loss and are struggling to follow, and maybe give just people some help of things they can do. To explain that you need to face them when they're talking, and other things they might be doing. Maybe they're covering their mouth, explaining that you need to be able to see their mouth to understand them. And explain to the teacher. Sometimes teachers might forget. You might be doing really well in school and you're wearing your hearing aids, they think everything's fine. So they forget that they put you in a different seat and you can't hear. And it's really important that you tell the teacher straight away if it's hard to listen in class and why. It might be that someone's talking really loudly, and it's really important that you say something before it starts to affect how you can listen and understand in the classroom. So I know we've talked a lot about some of the things that might be hard if you have a hearing impairment, but just to remember that you really can do anything you want to do. And there are lots of people out there who've shown that they, even with a hearing impairment, they can go on to achieve really amazing things. So some pictures here. There's Millie Bobby Brown. She's got a hearing impairment. She's completely deaf in one of her ears. And there's Will I Am as well. Obviously, he works in music and he's got a hearing impairment. And there are lots of people out there who are very successful. They're doing lots of things that maybe you would think would be quite hard with a hearing impairment, but they've been able to overcome them through being confident and being open about their difficulties. Yeah, just something to remember. So if you are struggling, or you've watched this and you think you are having trouble communicating and you'd like some help, there's lots of people you can talk to. So first, your family, your friends and school staff. They might be people you see every day, but also people who maybe have a bit more of an understanding of hearing impairment and deafness. So your teacher of the deaf, so that's either me or Sue, and you should get a visit from Hayley as well. So Hayley she's profoundly deaf in both her ears and wears hearing aids. So she has a real understanding of what it's like to be deaf. So she's a really good person to talk to. In school, you should have a listening champion, maybe somebody who's had lots of training. So they should understand a bit more about hearing impairment and how to help. Or a key worker in school, that's somebody that you might be able to talk to. Also, sometimes other students who have a hearing impairment are great to talk to because they might have been through it already and they might have some helpful advice for you. And also there's lots of useful information on the NDCS website. So that's the National Deaf Children's Society website. There's lots of information that might be helpful for you, and definitely something you should look at if you're having trouble or you just want to find out a bit more. So maybe if you just have a little think about what we've talked about today. So we started talking about communication and sometimes why it's hard. And we had to look at some strategies that might be useful for you to try when things are getting a bit difficult. So maybe just have a think and see if you can write down one thing that you have learned in the session today and that might help you in the future. And if you found this a useful session, please do move on to our next session, which is on hearing devices and how to look after them, why they're useful to us. Hopefully see you then. Thanks.